Okay, I'm going to get started by welcoming everyone. Welcome to Wat Tung. Nice to see everyone here this evening. Welcome to those of you guys joining online. Today is our group learning program where each Sunday at 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. I come together with students, helping them to understand the path to enlightenment. And what I do is I start class with meditation, and then afterwards I share a talk on the teachings. And what I do is I go chapter by chapter in this first book that we have. It's called Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. And over a 7-month period, I go chapter by chapter. And today we're in chapter 3 because we just recently restarted this program. And the title of today's class is Enlightenment. What is enlightenment? So I'm going to help you to understand what this mental state is of enlightenment that the Buddha attained. And then he taught others how to attain this mental state. So if you'd like to stick around after meditation, you'll be able to learn about what is enlightenment. If you'd like to join for meditation, the way I do this is I start with some chanting. We have the chants over there on the cabinet. You're welcome to help yourself and chant along because it actually helps you to ease into the meditation and get more benefit out of the meditation itself. This isn't a rite, ritual, ceremony, worship, or prayer, or anything like that, because the Buddha never taught any of those kinds of things. If you see those kinds of things associated with the teachings of the Buddha, it's not actually his teachings. So I use the chanting as a way to ease the mind into meditation and get more benefit out of the meditation itself. Then I'm going to come in with some guidance to be able to help you during meditation. Then there's going to be a period of time of quietness where we're all meditating together. Then we'll come out of that with some more chanting, and that's where I'll start today's class. For all of you that are online, you can get these chanting sheets on our website at buddhadailywisdom.com. Just click on free books and scroll down towards the middle of that page, and you'll see the chanting sheets there. So make yourself comfortable in whatever position you like, either sitting on the floor in a chair. Maybe if you're at home, you're on a bench or a sofa or a wheelchair. You're welcome to join in the chanting, and then I'll come back in with the guidance. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakawa Wat Tung Mahakawanang Apiwateyami Savakato Mahakawata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Mahakawa Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang sammuno Sakato rokavitu Anutero purisa Dhamma sati satatawa Manusanang Poto Bhagavati. Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath. A nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then, whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakava Bhutang Mahakavanang Apivateyami Savakato Mahakavata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti Piso Mahakava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokavitu Anutero Purisa Dhammasati Satatawa Manusanang Bhutto Bhagavati. Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Once again, welcome to all of you guys. Nice to see everyone here. Welcome to everyone who's joining online as well. This individual who we refer to as the Buddha, he lived over 2,500 years ago, and he figured out how to get to enlightenment. And what I'm going to share with you today is what this enlightened mental state is, because he spent the rest of his life sharing with others how to actually experience this enlightened mental state. And if you're interested in understanding what this is and potentially even attaining it yourself, you're going to need to know what it is. He was born in 563 BCE in an area of the world that we refer to as Nepal, and he taught in northeast India, dying in 483 BCE. He lived for 80 years, and by the time he got to 29 years old, he had decided to walk away from his royal throne. He was actually a prince destined to become a king. And from the age of 29 to 35, he trained his mind to be able to experience this enlightened mental state. And then he taught for the rest of his life until the age of 80, helping people to understand how to get to this enlightened mental state. If you were interested in going somewhere, one of the first things that you would be interested to know is, well, what is that place? Like if I said, hey guys, would you like to go to Chiang Rai? Probably the first question you would ask me is, well, what is Chiang Rai, if you didn't know, right? Well, if somebody was talking about enlightenment or the teachings of the Buddha, and if you understood the teachings of the Buddha are to be able to get to this enlightened mental state, one of the first things you might ask is, what is enlightenment? Right? So here at the very beginning of the book, at the very beginning of this group learning program, the 7-month program that I have, I help people to understand what enlightenment is, because that way you'll be able to more easily navigate your way to it. If you didn't understand what enlightenment is, you wouldn't actually be able to navigate your way to it. So for example, if I said, hey, would you guys like to go to Chiang Rai? You guys would be like, well, what is Chiang Rai? right? Well, if I said, well, it's this city to the north of Chiang Mai, it's 3 hours away, you got to go through the mountains, and when you arrive, you're going to see these kinds of things. Well, then you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I'd like to kind of go there. And now you'd be able to more easily navigate your way to it because you know to leave going north on the roads and going through the mountains, and you'd make your way towards the city of Chiang Rai. And once you arrived at Chiang Rai, you'd actually know that you're there because I described a little bit about what it is. But if you didn't know what Chiang Rai was, you wouldn't actually be able to navigate your way to it. So the same thing is true about this enlightened mental state, that if you didn't understand what it is, you wouldn't actually be able to navigate your way to it. Because everything that the Buddha taught is about training your mind. He didn't teach rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, and prayer, and these kinds of things. If you're seeing these kinds of things associated with his teachings, he didn't teach those kinds of things. He also didn't teach rules and commandments. That's not his teachings. If people talk about it in that way, that's not what he actually taught. He's teaching you to train your mind to develop into a better and better human being. And you need wisdom to be able to do that. So his teachings aren't based in belief because you don't know what's true or false. You're just believing it because somebody either convinced you to believe it or you convinced yourself to believe it. But you need to be able to learn, examine, and investigate his teachings to be able to reflect on them to verify if they're true or false. And then you need to practice his teachings, integrating them into your life. And this is where you start experiencing more and more of the qualities of enlightenment. So I'm going to share with you guys what this enlightened mental state is, and then I'm going to pause a few times, opening up for questions and see if you guys have anything you would like to ask. And if you're here at the temple and you'd like to ask questions, we have microphones in the white bowl there, and there's some up here as well. If you'd like to ask a question, just get a microphone and bring it to your seat. You can press the gray button. You'll see the lights come on, and you can just hold this up to your chin, and we'll be able to hear you here at the temple, and they'll be able to hear you online as well. If you speak here without a microphone, they won't be able to hear you online. And then you can keep these with you because you might have more than one question, or someone around you might have a question. And if you could turn it off when you're not using it, that'll be helpful so that we don't get feedback through the speakers. And then for anybody who's online, you can put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom in the comment section, and I'll be able to see that. Or in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand, unmute your microphone, and then ask any and all questions that you like that way. So the first thing to share with you about this enlightened mental state is that it's very challenging for the unenlightened mind to be able to understand what enlightenment is. It's kind of like if you've never had chocolate ice cream before, and I was to sit here and explain to you what chocolate ice cream is, you'd understand more about what chocolate ice cream is after our conversation than before our conversation, but you wouldn't fully understand what chocolate ice cream is until you actually tasted it yourself. And it's the same thing that's true with enlightened mental state, is that I can sit here and explain it to you all day long, and you'll know more about it after our conversation than before it, but you're not going to fully understand it until you're starting to experience more and more of the qualities of this enlightened mental state. So while it is a challenge to understand, you should take every opportunity you can to ask any and all questions if you have questions about what it is as I go. So what enlightenment is it's a mental state that is attainable during this life or at death, where the mind is completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. It is a permanent mental state where the mind is steady, stable, and unshakable. There's focus, concentration, clarity, and deep memory in the mind. The mind is completely at peace, and you will no longer experience any discontent feelings. It is physically impossible for an enlightened being to experience feelings like anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. All of that has been eliminated from the mind through training the mind. Oftentimes people think it's the outside world that's causing these feelings, but it's actually what's going on within your own mind. You can actually independently verify this, that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings. Another person is incapable of inserting a feeling into your mind. It's just not possible, that it's your mind itself that's causing these feelings. And that's why you can actually eliminate them, because it's the mind itself that's causing them. When the mind is enlightened, it'll be relaxed and calm, but yet attentive and alert. Oftentimes when people think about relaxed and calm, they think about kind of like laying back and being so relaxed and so calm, right? That's not what the enlightened mind is. It's relaxed and calm inwardly, but it's sharp, it's attentive, it's focused. that the mind is alert. So that's what the enlightened mental state is, that you can attain it in this life, and you'll be experiencing that mental qualities for the rest of your life. And you can also attain it at death too. It would be ideal to attain it during your life, because then you'll get to enjoy the rest of your life in this enlightened mental state. But the next best option would be to experience it at death. Because if you do experience it at death, at least you're not going to experience rebirth back into the world. The Buddha taught this cycle of rebirth. And as you heard me share, everything in the teachings of the Buddha are not based in belief. You can independently verify his teachings. Right now, you might be believing you only have one life, but you don't have any evidence that you only have one life, other than the fact that right now you just can't remember your previous lives, perhaps. But you might have had something like deja vu, where you've had a certain situation where you're experiencing something and it seems utterly familiar to you, but you know that you didn't do that in this life. This is your residual memories from your previous lives that are surfacing to the surface of your mind. And as you get rid of more and more of the pollution in the mind through training the mind the way that the Buddha taught, you might actually notice that you start experiencing more memories from your previous lives. And if you didn't understand that that is true reality, that's the way the world works, you could be really shaken up during that time. So the Buddha teaches you about this cycle of rebirth, but you should never believe in it. It's something that you can independently verify. But it's not something that you usually focus on when you're first getting started. But just understand what I'm teaching you today related to enlightenment. There's kind of this undertone about the cycle of rebirth, because once you get to enlightenment, you will not be reborn back into the world over and over and over and over again. The mind, by the time you get to enlightenment, it will be free of craving, anger, and ignorance. This is the way to talk about the pollutions that the Buddha discovered at a high level. We refer to these as the three poisons, or the three unwholesome roots, or the three fires. The mind will be purified of these things. Now, while the enlightened mental state is a mental state, the path to enlightenment is a purification of the mind, where you've actually purified the mind of the causes and conditions that are producing the unenlightened state. So while we call it attaining enlightenment, one of the ways you might think about it is the mind is already enlightened. It's kind of like the sun is there, but the clouds are blocking it, and you can't see the sun because the clouds are in the way. But when you get the clouds out of the way, the rays of the sun slowly start shining through. And the same thing is true about this enlightened mental state, that when you slowly peel away the pollutions out of the mind, you'll see the qualities of enlightenment slowly starting to shine through. But the only difference in this analogy is that in the case of the clouds and the sun, the clouds are going to come back and block the sun at some point. But that's not the case with the enlightened mental state, that once you get the pollutions out of the way, that they don't come back, because you've completely eradicated them from the mind, and it's a permanent mental state that you're experiencing. Some people refer to enlightenment as happiness or ultimate bliss. While there's plenty of happiness in the enlightened mental state, I don't describe it that way, because you understand happiness right now, but this is conditional happiness, that you experience conditional happiness, meaning there has to be some condition met in order for you to experience happiness. So if it's sunny outside and you get happy because it's sunny, that is conditional happiness, that you've based your happiness on the sun. But the problem with that is when it rains, you'll be sad or frustrated. Or if you get really happy when your bank account balance is up here, this is conditional happiness. And then when your bank account balance goes down here, you'll be sad and frustrated, because you're basing your inner feelings on some condition, and that condition is not permanent. You're going to experience the opposite of the happiness. You're going to experience the sadness or frustration. That's why your mind keeps going up and down at different times in your life, because your mind is forming its inner feelings based on some impermanent condition. That's why you haven't been able to get to permanent happiness, because the unenlightened mind experiences conditional feelings. It's kind of like, if my mom and dad does this, if my brothers and sisters do this, if my boss does this, if the weather is this, if my bank account is this, if I have this kind of house and this kind of car, then I'll be happy, right? So your happiness is shrinking because all of those conditions can't be met permanently. By the time you get to enlightenment, you're experiencing unconditioned happiness, unconditioned joy, where the mind doesn't need any condition to be met in order to experience happiness. So in this unenlightened state, you understand happiness. Like you're kind of maybe even bouncing off the walls. It's like, yay, I'm so happy. My mom's coming over. She's going to cook that food that I've always been interested in from when I was a little kid. Man, she's going to cook that recipe for me. This is going to be so great to see my mom. But then when mom leaves, you're like, oh, mom, you have to leave. I'm going to miss you so much, right? This is the mind experiencing conditional feelings. So you understand that conditional happiness. That's not what enlightenment is. The mind is experiencing unconditioned happiness or unconditioned joy, where there doesn't need to be any condition met in order for you to experience that happiness. And therefore, it's permanent because there's no condition that's causing it. So therefore, it can't be eliminated from the mind. So I describe enlightenment as this unconditional happiness or unconditioned joy, where oftentimes people in the jhanas are experiencing this ultimate bliss. They think they're actually enlightened when in reality they're not, and they're describing what they're experiencing as enlightenment, when in reality they're not actually enlightened yet. This is where sometimes not only will you hear people say that enlightenment is ultimate bliss, but they will say enlightened beings still experience sadness and frustration and anger. If you Google right now, does an enlightened being still experience anger? It will say yes, but that's not true, because enlightened beings don't experience those kinds of things. So there's a lot of people in the world that think enlightened beings still experience sadness and guilt and shame and fear and stress and anxiety, but that's not actually true. I can assure you of that. I know this with 100% certainty. So by the time you get to this enlightened mental state, the mind is experiencing complete peace and complete joy. But if you think you're enlightened and you're describing what enlightenment is based on your experiences, then you might describe enlightenment as someone who still experiences anger, sadness, frustration, these other feelings. So this is what enlightenment is. The advantages of enlightenment is, as I shared, the mind is completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. It's a permanent mental state. The mind will have a high degree of focus, concentration, memory, and clarity of mind, which in the unenlightened state, you'll lack these things because the mind has those pollutions and it's now being hindered from being able to experience those qualities. So your mind will be performing optimally by the time you get to enlightenment. You'll no longer have any of these discontent feelings. As I shared, it's physically impossible to experience these discontent feelings because the causes and conditions that are producing them have been uprooted out of the mind. You'll notice that the mind has this deep wisdom that other people don't actually have in the world, because that's how you actually get to enlightenment, is you cultivate wisdom about the natural laws. Just like we cultivated the wisdom of the natural law of gravity, and that helped us to make wiser decisions, and we no longer struggle with that any longer. The same thing is happening with these natural laws that the Buddha taught, that you need to cultivate wisdom about them. And when you understand what those are, your mind won't struggle and have difficulties in the world any longer, because you'll be able to navigate the world peacefully. So this stress and anxiety, the anger, the frustration, and all these other feelings, this is the mind struggling to live in a world that it doesn't understand. But by the time you cultivate this wisdom, your mind won't be experiencing that any longer. You'll notice that you'll be able to be polite, kind, friendly, and respectful to everybody around you, where right now you might find that difficult. There might be certain situations where you're impolite, unkind, unfriendly, and disrespectful. And that's actually coming from your own mind. You can transform all of that. But in the unenlightened state, you're going to still be doing those kinds of things. But by the time you get to enlightenment, you can be polite, kind, friendly, respectful to everybody. You'll notice that you're not causing any harm to other people. And because of this, you'll notice your personal and professional relationships are really blossoming. They'll be at ease, that you won't have bitterness and harshness and hostility anymore. And since you're not putting that out, it's not coming back to you either. Right now, you can look at your relationships where you're being bitter and harsh and hostile. All that's coming back to you. Those people are treating you exactly the same way that you treat them. But if you transform your mind and you start treating people polite, kind, friendly, and respectful for an extended period of time, using the teachings of the Buddha to train your mind, you'll notice that your relationships will improve. Oftentimes people think the way to improve a relationship is to change the other person, but you will never get to peace and joy, changing other people, because there's 8 billion people in the world, and not everybody's going to do things your way. It's not possible. But the mind's ego is going to think my way is the right way and everybody else's way is the wrong way. So by the time you get to enlightenment, you're not being bitter and harsh and hostile, understanding that people are going to make different choices than you, and that's okay. This is just impermanence. So these are some of the advantages of enlightenment. By the time you get to enlightenment, you can't even be in a bad mood any longer. It's physically impossible to experience a bad mood. The way that you get to this enlightened mental state is by practicing these teachings to start off with. These are the core central teachings that are going to guide you to developing the mind on the path to enlightenment. And this is what I focus on in all of our foundational programs. And in this particular program on Sunday and Wednesday, I actually go beyond this. And there's actually more that people learn over a 7-month period. But the 3 universal truths, the 4 noble truths, the Eightfold Path, the 5 precepts, these are the things that you start with. But you don't believe these teachings. They're not rules and commandments. It's actually helping you to be able to understand the natural laws. So you need to learn, examine, and investigate these teachings, reflect on them to independently verify if they're true or false, and then you need to practice them, integrating them into your day-to-day life and making decisions through that wisdom. Then you'll need to learn what's called the Brahma Viharas. These are 4 healthy mental states that are going to actually combat certain symptoms that are in your mind. This is where the Buddha gets the reputation like a doctor, that there are certain symptoms that he sees in the mind, and then there's a certain prescription or antidote that you apply. But you're your own best doctor. You're with this mind all the time. So if you understand the symptoms and you understand the prescription, you can actually apply this yourself and you can transform your mind. So this is something that I teach as well. And then there's something called the 10 fetters, which I'll introduce you guys to today. You'll need to know the 7 factors of enlightenment, which is a way to fine-tune the mind. This isn't to determine if you are enlightened or aren't enlightened, but instead to fine-tune the mind. Then there's extensive meditation training that you practice as part of your journey to enlightenment. But you need much more than just meditation. You wouldn't be able to meditate your way to enlightenment, but you also wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment without meditation either. One of the biggest myths about the life story of the Buddha is people think he sat under a tree, he meditated, and then instantly got to enlightenment. And this isn't actually true. He actually says very clearly that it was gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress, that it was not instantaneous that he got to enlightenment. So these are the core central teachings that you would need to learn to get to enlightenment. Do you guys have any questions on anything I'm sharing so far up to this point? Anything here, anything online? Yes, sir. If you could use a mic, that'd be great. The people online will appreciate that. You just press the gray button, and once it comes on, then you'll be able to talk. There you go.
I think, I'm not sure if this is a question, more of just like, just a little hard to reconcile the idea of the enlightenment or the enlightened mind being a state of permanence when like so much of like also like Buddha's teaching is also about impermanence. So it's just like I find it hard to reconcile between the idea of so much teachings around impermanence and but at the same time enlightenment is a state of permanence. So I'm just a little stuck on that.
So maybe your question is, can you help me to understand why enlightenment is permanent?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
I'll answer that question for you. Okay, so one of the misunderstandings that people have is they think that the Buddha taught everything is impermanent, and this isn't actually true. The Buddha taught what's called conditioned objects. These are impermanent. They arise, they change, and they fade away. They are impermanent. Anything that you can see, hear, smell, taste, anything that comes in contact with the body, or any thoughts or ideas that go through the mind, this is all impermanent. So you can look around the world and see all material objects are impermanent because they're conditioned. They arise, they change, and then they fade away. But then there's what's called unconditioned objects. The Buddha taught this as well, and I can show it to you in his own words. An unconditioned object does not arise, it doesn't change, and it doesn't fade away. It is permanent. And there's 2 things that are permanent. Enlightenment is that way, as well as the natural laws that the Buddha taught. He taught these natural laws, and those natural laws haven't changed from his lifetime. That's why over 2,500 years ago, his teachings are just as applicable today as they are 2,500 years ago, because these natural laws haven't changed. So in the unenlightened state, you are experiencing conditioned feelings. Remember, a conditioned object arises, changes, and fades away. There are certain conditions in your mind that are causing your mind to form those feelings, and they are now conditioned. That's why your happiness arises, changes, and fades away. So does your sadness, your anger, your shyness, your guilt and shame and fear. It arises, changes, and fades away. By the time you get to enlightenment, you've removed all the conditions in the mind that are causing those conditioned feelings. Your mind is now unconditioned. It's purified. And now with an unconditioned mind, you don't experience conditioned feelings anymore. That you don't experience the arising, changing, and fading away of feelings. Instead, you're experiencing unconditioned mental states where the mind doesn't need any condition to be met in order to experience those mental states of peace, calm, serenity, and contentedness with joy. So the mind is unconditioned, and an unconditioned object doesn't arise, it doesn't change, and it doesn't fade away. So the mind is now unconditioned. So that's why enlightenment is actually permanent, because it doesn't have any causes and conditions that are producing those conditioned feelings. Namely, it's actually what I'm about to teach you next, which is the 10 fetters. You've purified the mind of this. This is the causes and conditions that are producing conditioned feelings. So when you get these out of the mind is now pure. It is unconditioned, and you won't experience conditioned feelings any longer. It's a permanent mental state. Mm-hmm. Any other questions you guys have? Yes, ma'am.
Hear me?
Sure can.
Okay. So you said like it's impermanent and you don't need conditions to feel content. And at the same time, I was wondering how would an enlightened being behave when people, for example, abuse them
Mm-hmm.
or hit them
Mm-hmm.
or like come into their space and they shouldn't. Like, how can they be annoyed? How can they be angry?
Right. Because the unenlightened mind craves permanence. It wants things to be a certain way permanently. It has a want or an expectation, a longing, a yearning, and it can only be happy when it's getting things that way. So your happiness is really minimal because there's all these conditions that have to be met. By the time you get to enlightenment, you understand impermanence, that things in the world are constantly changing and you're not holding on and craving permanence. So you understand that this body is going to be uncomfortable sometimes. So if you stump your toe, you understand, yeah, the body's experiencing physical pain, but that is not permanent, that this body can't be comfortable permanently. So there's this physical pain there, but also that physical pain is not permanent either. The body will ultimately go back to being comfortable. So when you have a craving for permanent comfort, some of those examples that you described, the mind's going to be annoyed or frustrated. But just so you know, an enlightened being isn't going to be experiencing those kinds of things. You're not going to experience abuse and these kinds of things. You will experience people being disrespectful occasionally. 99.999% of the time, an enlightened being doesn't experience any of those kinds of things, but there will be occasions, but your mind won't be shaken up by it because you understand impermanence. Some people are going to be polite, kind, friendly, respectful to you. Other people aren't. That's impermanence. But in the unenlightened state, you will crave everyone to treat you a certain way. And you can only be happy when they treat you that way. And when they don't treat you that way, you'll be angry or frustrated. So an enlightened being is experiencing the world very differently. Their mind is completely joyful and peaceful because they're comfortable with impermanence, where an unenlightened being is craving and wanting and expecting things to be a certain way. But if an enlightened being was hit, even though that's very unlikely, but if they were, they wouldn't be upset or angry. It'd be physically impossible for them. Instead, they would just choose to move away from that situation and get away as soon as possible. Where an unenlightened being, they'll have ego and they'll be like, man, what did you hit me for? I'm going to knock you out. You shouldn't have done that. Who do you think you are? Right? The ego is going to come in and now it's going to want to bulk up and argue and fight, where an enlightened being understands that's the most unwise thing you can do. Instead, just walk away. But if you have an ego, your mind's not going to let you do that. So by the time you get to enlightenment, that ego is gone, and you're having loving kindness and compassion for this being who you are. And you realize the best thing to do is just get away from this unwise person who's choosing to cause harm through their bodily actions. Mm-hmm. Okay, I don't see any other questions. So what I'll do here is I'm going to introduce you to these 10 pollutions, because this is what you're actually eliminating as part of the path to enlightenment. And all the teachings of the Buddha are helping you in one way or another to eliminate these pollutions of mind, because this is what's keeping your mind in the unenlightened state. And as I describe these, you'll actually be able to tell that your mind actually has these in your mind, because I'm going to explain to you the symptoms of them so that you can hear what these things are. So for example, like personal existence view. What this is where the mind is clinging to the body or the mind or the self-image and the self-identity, wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way. And you can only be comfortable if you're being perceived the way you want to be perceived. So for example, if you've ever been in a social situation where you spilt something on your clothing and you were embarrassed by that, that's your personal existence view. You're only happy if you're being perceived the way you want to be perceived by others. If you looked in the mirror and you saw a wrinkle or a pimple or a mole or a gray hair, or you started losing your hair and you were shaken up by that, that's your personal existence view, clinging to this body, thinking that this is who you are. And you can only be comfortable if you are being perceived that way. Or say you stood in front of your closet and you thought, who am I going to see today? And how do I want to look? And maybe you put on some clothes and you looked in the mirror, and you put on some other clothes. You looked in the mirror, you're like, no, I can't go outside yet. And you put on another set of clothes. You're like, all right, now I feel comfortable to go outside, right? This is personal existence view. The mind is wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way and only feeling comfortable to go outside when you feel that way, or when you're outside and you don't get people perceiving you the way you want to be perceived, you'll be shaken up by this. When I was a little kid, I'd had this as a teenager so much that I used to get gel and mousse, and I would run it through my hair and try to get every little hair in exactly the right spot before I go to school. And sometimes I'd do this for so long I'd miss the school bus, right? So you might have experienced some of these things. You can see you have personal existence view, clinging to this body, wanting it to be permanent, when in reality, this body is not permanent. Or you might be clinging to the self-identity in the mind of who you think you are as a person, your nationality, your ethnicity, your sexual orientation, your job or occupation, maybe your nationality. Maybe like I am American, or I am German, or I am Singaporean, or I am Chinese, I am Canadian. Any of this I am. And now let's just say, for example, you're at a restaurant and 2 tables over, someone says, all Americans are lovely and kind and warm and gentle. I've never heard this before, but maybe somebody might say something like this, right? And now you get so excited and happy because they're talking about me, right? But then now maybe 2 tables over, they're talking to something degrading or disrespectful or disparaging, right? And now you're angry and frustrated about that because you think they're talking about me, right? So as long as you have this personal existence view where you're holding on to a self-identity, you can't be permanently happy and permanently peaceful because you're clinging to this as who you think you are. Or say you've ever been in a relationship with a boyfriend or girlfriend and you thought, I am a boyfriend, I am a girlfriend, or I am a husband, I am a wife. And now when you guys are together, there's a certain amount of comfort. But then when you guys break up, you might have felt like you wanted to hurry up and get right back into another relationship because your mind wasn't comfortable with I am single. And the mind thought the way to solve that is hurry up and get back in another relationship so I can reassume that identity of I'm a boyfriend, I'm a girlfriend. But that doesn't actually solve the problem because the problem is the personal existence view. That's the actual cause of the problem. So getting back into another relationship really quickly doesn't actually solve your problem because when you're single again, you don't feel comfortable. This is the mind craving permanence. So this personal existence view needs to be eradicated out of the mind, and there's training that'll help you to do that. And by the time I get to chapter 16 of this book in this program, I'm actually going to teach all the detailed steps of how to eliminate it. Then there's something called doubt. What doubt is where you have doubt about the teachings of the Buddha and the ability of them to attain enlightenment. It's common for people to have doubt when they first come to the path to enlightenment, because how could you have confidence in the teachings if you don't even know what they are, right? So if you have doubt about the teachings of the Buddha, that's normal. But it's going to hinder you from getting to enlightenment, because as long as you have that doubt, you're not going to be willing to approach the teachings and actually start learning them and be able to get to the point where you can actually learn them and get the benefit of them. But you don't eliminate your doubt through blind belief or faith or anything like that. The way that you eliminate your doubt is through investigation and examination of the teachings. When you investigate and examine them, and then you reflect on them to verify whether they're true or false, and then you practice them, and you actually see the condition of your mind improving, and you see your life improving, you'll get to the point where you know without a doubt that these teachings are actually working to help you get closer and closer to enlightenment. You'll have confidence in the Buddha, confidence in his teachings, confidence in the community that you're part of. You'll have confidence in your teacher, and you'll have confidence in your own ability to get to enlightenment, because you'll see that your mind's actually doing it. So if you have doubt right now, that's normal. That's how somebody usually comes to the path to enlightenment. I had doubt when I first came to the path, but not anymore. I've seen that these teachings lead exactly where the Buddha said that they do, to this enlightened mental state. So you can actually harness this doubt, where you can tell yourself, yeah, you have doubt. Just admit it to yourself. Yeah, I doubt whether the teachings of the Buddha are true. I don't think that way anymore, but I'll speak as if I'm you, right? Maybe you'll say, yeah, I have doubt. So what you do is you roll up the sleeves. You harness this doubt, turn it into an inquisitive mind where you sink your teeth in and you really investigate the teachings. And then as you're doing that, you're going to get to the point where you've seen so much progress eventually that you won't have any doubt anymore. You'll have confidence in these things. Then there's something called wrong behavior and observances. There's two parts to this. In the unenlightened state, there'll be a certain amount of behavior or moral conduct that you're doing that is unwise, where you might be bitter and harsh and hostile to the people around you. And you might actually feel like you're justified in that. And you might actually think that other people are causing you to do that. But it's actually your own mind that's doing that. And as long as you're conducting yourself in ways where you're being bitter and harsh and hostile to people with your moral conduct, it's all just going to keep coming back to you. So the Buddha teaches you this cause and effect, or this action and result, so that you can improve the way you interact with other people, and how to improve what you experience coming back to you. Because how could you get to peace and joy if you just keep experiencing this bitterness and harshness and hostility keep coming back to you over and over and over again? But if that's what is coming back to you, that means that's what you're putting out. So if you eliminate that, that's actually going to help you to get to more peace and more joy within your own mind, because you're not being bitter, harsh, and hostile. And because you're not putting that out, it won't be coming back to you. So there's teachings in one of his core central teachings called the Eightfold Path that is teaching you how to improve your moral conduct so that you're not causing harm to others through your speech, your actions, and your livelihood. And now by not causing harm, you'll see less and less harm coming back to you. And eventually, you'll get to the point where you've completely purified the mind, and will experience nothing but people interacting with you in a very wonderful way, because that's the way that you interact with them. But there's still going to be that occasional situation where somebody's bitter, harsh, and hostile, even when you're enlightened, but your mind's unaffected by it, because you understand that this person is causing that themselves. It's not you that's causing that hostility and bitterness in their mind. Then there's something called wrong observances. What this is that if somebody believes that rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship is going to lead to improvement in their life, then they're not understanding that those things don't lead to improvement in their life. The thing that's going to lead to improvement in your life is wisdom, because you can't use rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship in order to improve your relationships or in order to advance in your career at work. Those things don't lead to improvement in your day-to-day life. You're going to need to cultivate wisdom, where you make wiser and wiser decisions in your day-to-day life. So if you're seeing rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, and things like this, even prayer associated with the teachings of the Buddha never taught any of those kinds of things. But oftentimes people are misunderstanding accepting his teachings and thinking that that's what it takes to be able to improve your day-to-day life. But you can see that it's your own mind that's causing these difficulties and struggles, and that you need to cultivate wisdom in order to be able to experience improved results. And there's no amount of water that I can sprinkle on you that's going to help you to cultivate wisdom. There's no amount of strings that I can tie on your wrist that's going to help you to cultivate wisdom. So whether you choose to do these things or not, it's a choice for you to make, but the Buddha teaches you to help you understand that they aren't going to lead to improvement in your day-to-day life, right? So maybe you're going out to a family event and people are going to the church or the synagogue or the temple or the mosque, and you like to go out with everybody because it's hanging out with your family and your friends. And maybe they're doing all kinds of rites and rituals and ceremonies, and maybe you're there too. And maybe you're singing and having a good time and all that kind of stuff. That's fine. That's up to you. The Buddha's not teaching you what you should or shouldn't do in terms of how he's maybe trying to convince you to do anything. He's just helping you to be able to see that as long as your mind has the thought that these rituals and ceremonies are going to somehow improve your life, then you're not understanding what the number one problem is in the mind, which is the lack of wisdom. That's why an individual struggles and has difficulties in their day-to-day life, because they don't understand the wisdom of how the world truly functions. Then there's something called sensual desire. This is where the mind is longing, yearning through the sense spaces, wanting agreeable contact. And when you get agreeable contact, you'll experience pleasant feelings. And when you experience disagreeable contact, you'll experience painful feelings. So through your eyes, ears, nose, tongue, the body, and the mind itself, the mind is craving permanently agreeable contact. And when you experience contact that is agreeable to you, you'll experience pleasant feelings. But when you have disagreeable contact, you'll get painful feelings. So for example, if you're at a stoplight and someone pulls up to you with some music that you particularly like and you listen to this music, you might be like, all right, that's my jam. All right, let's go. Let's have a party. Party, 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 right? But now if somebody pulls up to you with a type of music that you don't like and you find it to be disagreeable, that's where your mind gets frustrated or agitated or annoyed, because you're hearing a sound in your ear that is disagreeable to you. And your mind in the unenlightened state will firmly believe that it's that person who's causing you to be frustrated, or that music, where in reality, it's the mind's sensual desire, that the mind is craving permanently agreeable contact. When you actually live in an impermanent world, you're not going to experience permanently agreeable contact. So if you're walking down the street and you smell the flowers coming out of a flower shop and you get really excited, then when you walk a couple more steps and you smell the sewer, you'll get frustrated or agitated or annoyed. You might be repulsed. It's like, oh, that's horrible. Well, this is just the mind having sensual desire. It's craving permanently agreeable contact through the nose when you live in an impermanent world. So you're going to smell occasional smells that you're like, that's pretty ripe. Let me just keep walking, right? No need to sit there and complain and get upset and angry and frustrated about this impermanent situation. So your mind's doing this with all these sense bases. And when the mind's not getting what it wants and it's experiencing those painful feelings, it will firmly believe that it's something external that's causing this. And that's where the ill will come in. This ill will is the bitterness and harshness and hostility. And the mind will vent this towards other people through your intentions, your speech, and your actions, firmly believing that that other person is causing your anger, when in reality, it's the mind's central desire just not getting what it wants. So this ill will can be uprooted out of the mind, because walking around with anger and hostility and bitterness, it's just causing you difficulties in your relationships. And the Buddha has tools and techniques to uproot all of these out of the mind. So do you guys have questions on any of these 5? Anything you'd like to ask? Joe, you have a question? Remember, those of you guys online, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or in Zoom.
Yeah, Mr. David, my question is on sensual desire with the mind. Could that be like, so I can't control what I dream. I don't know what's going to come in when I go to sleep. So, recently there's been dreams that have been occurring of my past that I'm I'm not so much attached to the experience in the dream, but it brings up a memory throughout the day.
Mm-hmm.
I guess my question would be, how would I cut off and let go of that thought in my mind?
Yeah, so this is the mind sense base that you're going to sometimes experience dreams that are pleasurable and that are enjoyable. And sometimes you're going to have dreams that aren't that way because of impermanence. And the mind needs to understand when you wake up that this is not true reality. Whatever this dream was, it's not true reality, and you just cut it off, whatever feelings are arising. By the time you get to enlightenment, you won't have those feelings arising. You'll just wake up and be like, interesting dream, and keep on walking, right? But in the unenlightened state, you'll get so pleasurable or you'll get so angry or frustrated based on whatever was going on in your dream because you're allowing your mind to be affected by that. Where you just need to understand that the mind is going to experience enjoyable dreams sometimes, and other times they're not going to be enjoyable. And that's just impermanence. And you don't need to form feelings based on that. It's just like you could eat a piece of chocolate cake that tastes really great, or you could eat a piece of chocolate cake that's just like, it's not so good, right? You need to get to the point where it's just chocolate cake. And sometimes it's going to taste great and sometimes it's not. I don't know that I've ever had a bad piece of chocolate cake. Maybe I have actually, right? But nonetheless, you understand the point, right? So with dreams that is going on in the mind sense base, there hasn't been any contact through the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, the body, but it's the mind. And that's why the Buddha includes it as a sixth sense, because you can form feelings right now in the present moment based on things that happened in the past or based on things that you're anticipating occurring in the future. That maybe you're in a business meeting and you're thinking about your trip to Thailand and you just can't wait to go. And now you get so excited, where the mind is just thinking about the future. Or you could have a situation coming up in the future that you experience stress and anxiety about. Again, there hasn't been any contact through the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, or the body. It's just the mind itself. And dreams are a perfect example of that. So in the dream itself, you're not going to have the consciousness to cut off and let go. But when you wake up and you realize it was a dream, that's where you cut it off. You just keep on going with your day, redirecting your mind, not sitting there dwelling in whatever thoughts that you had in your dream. That'll allow your mind to let it go and move on.
Thank you. I have one more question on the sensual desire part of the mind. If I'm excited or anticipating something that's going to happen in the future, even though it's a wholesome thought, but it's arousing excitement, should I cut off and let that go?
Yes, because that's still a conditioned feeling. The pleasant feeling is the mind is trying to form this pleasant feeling based on the condition of this thing in the future.
Okay.
So if you get really excited that you're about to go to America and you're about to fly to America and go get this job that you're going to get, well, let's just say you show up to the airport and your flight's canceled or delayed. You'll be frustrated. Or say you get to America and they say, hey, buddy, you're here, but we actually don't have a job for you. Sorry. Now you're going to be angry, right? Because you're allowed your mind to get that excitement. So just understand like, hey, this is an opportunity that I got. I'm going to go to the US. I'm going to potentially work at this job. You don't know for sure, 100%, right? Something could change. Let's just say the restaurant blows up, right? You don't know, right? Anything could happen. So you go with the intention that you're going to work at this place, but understanding impermanence can happen. So if you allow your mind to get so excited about this opportunity, now you're not going to be able to experience that permanently because you're basing your pleasant feeling on an impermanent object. And if something changes, you're going to experience the painful feeling. So you'd like to cut off that conditioned pleasant feeling, because then you can get to unconditioned joy, unconditioned happiness. Because if you go to America and they don't have your job, it's like, oh, well, they don't have my job. Let me see if I can find another one, right? You just maintain your happiness if you're not clinging and craving for that particular job. Now you're just like, well, I guess that one's not available. Let me see what else is available. I can find something, right? And that's how you maintain your joy. Whereas if you cling to that job, now you're only going to be happy if you get it. You see what I mean? Okay. So you cut off those conditioned pleasant feelings so that that's the temporary pleasant feelings so that you can get to the permanent happiness and the permanent joy. Yep. Yep.
Or
yeah, there you go. It's on now. Yep. You might have just turned it off.
just
There you go.
okay, right. Okay. So my question might be a bit off topic, but it came up because of what you have just discussed or brought up. So I would like to ask, where is the
The signal's just impermanent, like the Buddha taught. So it's going to drop out every once in a while. Yeah. Yeah. That one's going to do the same thing at some point because it's not permanent.
okay? So I wondered the clear difference between consciousness, perception, and wisdom.
Okay. So the consciousness is just another name for the mind. That's all that the word consciousness means. Is if you could turn that off, that way we won't get feedback. I'll let you finish that before I teach you. Okay. So the consciousness is just another name for the mind. Okay. There's the mind. It's like a cardboard box. It's a non-physical, non-tangible entity. There's the brain, which is physical, but then the mind is non-physical. So the mind and the consciousness, it's synonymous with each other. A perception is your views and opinions about the world that may or may not actually be true. And that's inside the mind, along with other things too, but their perceptions are inside the mind. Wisdom is something that you've independently verified, that you've investigated it, you've reflected on it, and now you're actually practicing it. You actually know with 100% certainty that this is actually true. And not only have you independently verified it, but if you taught it to somebody else, they would be able to independently verify it as well, that it's actually true. Mm-hmm. You have a question, Gavin? Mm-hmm.
Hello. Okay. Sorry. So, kind of expanding on Joe's illustration from previously. So, is it like on the path to enlightenment, it's kind of like better not to have intense emotions or feelings?
So by the time you get to enlightenment, you won't have strong feelings any longer. Oftentimes people cling to these feelings and think that somehow there's something beneficial about a feeling. In fact, there's some cultures that think if you get up and you do public speaking and you become emotional, that,
Right.
wow, that was such a good speech. That guy is so impassioned, or that girl is so impassioned. But there's nothing about a feeling that is actually beneficial for you because it's just arising, changing, and fading away. The mind's all shaken up. You can get to the point where the mind's just always cheerful, bright, glad, and uplifted. But these feelings, they're taking your mind up and down and up and down. It's only a matter of time before your mind forms a feeling on something external. So if you allow your mind to get the pleasant feelings that Joe's talking about, the conditioned pleasant feelings, that means that the painful ones are waiting for you right around the corner, because whatever condition is being met that is causing that conditioned pleasant feeling, that condition is not permanent. So as soon as that changes, your mind's going to end up in the painful feelings. And sometimes these are stretched so far away from each other that you don't even notice it. So say, for example, you get really excited when you got a brand new job, perfect salary, perfect company, perfect location, perfect office, perfect responsibilities, perfect coworkers. Everything's wonderful. And you get so excited about this new job. Well, 5 years later, when you get laid off, you're going to be angry or frustrated, right? Because you allowed your mind to get so happy when you got the job. That happiness is temporary because it's based on the job, and the job is not permanent. So as soon as that changes, your mind's going to end up in the painful feelings. So you can get to the point where you're having enthusiasm and ambition and motivation to go do this work, and you really enjoy the job, but all the while you know it's impermanent, and at some point it's going to come to an end. And when it does, you can still maintain your happiness and maintain your joy because you understand, hey, I enjoyed this job for 5 years, but there's another job that I can enjoy that too. And whether you're employed or you're unemployed, you can maintain your happiness and your joy. But if you can only be happy when you're employed with this type of company, that means your happiness is shrinking because all those conditions can't be met permanently. Mm-hmm. Does it make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Mhm.
But sorry, Teacher David, can you repeat the last part again? Like the shrinking part?
Yeah. So if you allow your mind to have conditioned feelings,
Right.
that means you can only be happy when those conditions are being met.
Okay.
So the more conditions you have in your mind, the more expectations that you have, the less happy you're going to be. This is why people sometimes are old and grumpy, right? Because as they've aged, they've collected up all these conditions that need to be met in order for them to be happy. And now when they get old, they have so many things in their mind that all those things can't be true. So now they're just grumpy and irritable all the time. Whereas if you get rid of this, where your mind can be happy no matter what's happening, whether it's hot, whether it's cold, whether you're hungry or whether you're full, whether you are in Thailand or you're in Singapore, now you can be happy all the time. But if you can only be happy when the sun is shining and you're in Thailand, you're eating mango and sticky rice, you're having a massage, your happiness is shrinking. Right? Because those things can't be true all the time. So the Buddha is teaching you how to get to a point where your mind's no longer forming feelings based on external circumstances, because all of those things are impermanent, which means you can't experience permanent happiness as long as you allow your mind to keep doing that.
Understand. But so in a sense, in other words, can I say that it's kind of like maintaining a stoic kind of point of view?
Say that again.
So in order to on the path of enlightenment, is it in other words is to maintain a stoic point of view?
No, oftentimes when I talk about how an enlightened being doesn't experience these conditioned feelings, sometimes people think that you must be numb or that you're just kind of mundane all the time. This isn't actually true. Your mind is cheerful, bright, glad, and uplifted. You're actually having way more fun than you ever had in the unenlightened state. Because in the unenlightened state, you can only have fun when things are going your way. Right? And that's not permanent. In the enlightened mental state, you can be happy no matter what. So your mind is cheerful, bright, glad, and uplifted at all times because there doesn't need to be any condition for that to occur. So your mind's no longer going up and down and up and down. Your mind is just always cheerful and bright and glad and uplifted. Right. But you're not bouncing off the walls with conditional excitement, which is what you're used to in the unenlightened state.
I understand. I'm so sorry, but I got one more last question.
Yeah, ask as many questions as you like.
But could it be that can this be fake? Like this feeling of joy and happiness?
Did you say fate or fake?
Faked.
Faked.
Yeah.
It can't be faked.
It can be faked.
No, because if somebody's mind gets triggered, they will experience discontentedness and you will see it. That's how you know whether someone's enlightened or not. If you spend enough time with somebody, you can see their mind and you can see all different situations that they're experiencing. And you can see that they never get angry. They never get frustrated, even the slightest bit annoyed at all. So you can't fake it for somebody who understands what enlightenment is and they can observe this person, because not only can you see it through their emotions and their feelings, but you can see it through their voice and the way that they talk. You can see it through their facial expressions and these other kinds of things. So for someone who truly knows what enlightenment is, you can actually observe it in somebody else. But that's not the goal of the path, is to go around and determine who's enlightened and who's not.
Right.
It's for you to focus on your enlightenment.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Is that
Thank
it?
you.
Yeah, I got some more.
Hello. Yeah. So I was wondering, because you said that everything is impermanent, but then enlightenment is like a permanent happiness, which to me it's a bit, they do not, how to say that, I can't find the words in English. You know what I mean? They are a little bit, that's a little bit weird to me, that we're not supposed to be in permanence because everything is impermanent. And then if we reach enlightenment, like we're happy all the time. which
Yes.
is kind of a permanent state then.
So I didn't say everything is permanent. What I said was some people think the Buddha said everything is impermanent, but instead he taught about conditioned objects and unconditioned objects. Do you remember the gentleman that was here, that was sitting over there? He asked about why is enlightenment permanent? And I explained how an unenlightened being experiences conditioned feelings, and an enlightened being is experiencing unconditioned feelings, or I'm sorry, unconditioned mental states. Do you remember me explaining that? Yeah. So that I answered your question already, actually, because somebody already asked it.
Yeah. I'm just like, I cannot grasp the idea of enlightenment and being happy all the time. I wouldn't want that for myself. Like, that's why I cannot grasp it, because I feel like those feelings, they're also enjoyable.
Yeah.
Like,
the happiness that you're used to now is not the happiness that you're experiencing in the enlightened mental state. And if you would like to continue to be sad and angry and frustrated and all those other feelings like anxiety and stress, the path to enlightenment isn't for you, because by the time you get to enlightenment, you're no longer experiencing that stuff. But what the unenlightened mind will do is it'll cling to that stuff, thinking that somehow it's beneficial for you to be sad and angry and feel grief and sorrow and sadness. There's nothing beneficial in those feelings whatsoever, but the mind will oftentimes perceive it that way and think of it in that way. So by the time you get to enlightenment, you won't be experiencing that kind of stuff any longer. And it's a much, 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 much better place to be in the enlightened mental state. That's why, think about this individual who we refer to as the Buddha. He was a prince destined to become a king, right? Maybe some people might think that's the best thing that could ever happen to you, be a king or a queen, right? He walked away from that, right? So how wonderful is enlightenment if he's walking away from a royal throne in order to be able to get to enlightenment? I can assure you that everything that you experience in the unenlightened state pales in comparison to what you will experience in the enlightened mental state. But you need to be able to see that truth for yourself, because a teacher is not here to convince their students of any particular thing. You need to be able to see it for yourself. But just keep in mind that the unenlightened mind will cling to feelings, thinking that somehow there's something beneficial in something like sadness or sorrow or anger or frustration, but it's just causing difficulties and struggles in your life, and you're going to keep experiencing those struggles for as long as your mind is in the unenlightened state. Mm-hmm. You have a question, Kevin? No? Okay. I thought I saw a mic in your hand. Oh, your phone. Okay. Okay. So there's some questions coming in here on YouTube. So here we have something about the permanence of enlightenment. If the enlightened mind stopped meditating for a long while, would you not go back to the unenlightened condition? No, it's physically impossible. An enlightened being wouldn't actually stop meditating, but if they did, their mind still wouldn't regress backwards, because it's a permanent mental state that once these pollutions that we're talking about are uprooted out of the mind, it's physically impossible for them to ever come back. It's kind of like if you had a weed and it was in the ground and you uprooted it out of the ground, it's impossible for that weed to ever grow again because the roots are completely eliminated. It's the same thing that once you eliminate these fetters, these pollutions, the roots are out of the mind, that it's no longer possible for them to actually grow again. Is the disappearance of conditioned happiness and emotions a consequence of doing the right thing, studying the teachings, meditating, or is it an active decision that needs to be made? It's actually all of those things, that there's certain decisions that you need to make in order to train the mind. And part of those decisions are about the way you conduct yourself on a day-to-day basis, because the reason why an individual conducts themselves in unwise ways is because of the pollutions. But at the core of getting to enlightenment is to purify the mind of these particular fetters that I'm talking about, where these are the things that are actually motivating unskillful conduct. So all the things you're talking about, yes, but that's the surface level that you're actually working to eliminate. The core that's underneath of all of this, that's producing the unwise moral conduct, is these particular fetters, these pollutions. So it's not just improving your behavior, like what the person was asking about, faking it, or I think it was Gavin, talking about faking it, that it's impossible for you to actually be able to do that because it's these pollutions of mind that are motivating this. And no matter what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, if you have these pollutions in your mind, you will experience the difficulties and struggles in your day-to-day life. Right? Okay, so let's see. All right, I don't see any other questions. So we'll move on here to the next 10. I'm going to talk about number 6 and 7 together because these are actually very similar. What desire for form and desire for formless is where the mind has a craving or desire to exist in either the form realms or the formless realms. So the Buddha taught these 5 realms of existence, and this is something that can be independently verified, that the realm of hell, the animal realm, the afflicted spirits, which are ghosts, there's human realm, and then there's the heavenly realm. These are all the 5 realms of existence. The form realms are the animal realm and the human realm because we have physical form. The formless realms are hell, the afflicted spirits, and the heavenly realm. If an individual has a craving for existence, then that means that they're holding on and clinging to this existence to be permanent. And if you're craving non-existence, then your mind isn't content and peaceful there either. What the Buddha is guiding you to is where you get to peace and joy in the present moment. So if you're longing, yearning for a future existence, or you're longing, yearning for non-existence, which means like you would like to kill yourself, then the mind's not content in the present moment. So by the time you get to enlightenment, you will have needed to eliminate any kind of craving for existence or for non-existence. I don't know about you guys, but at one time in my life, I thought it would be really cool to be a bird. I was like, wow, it'd be so cool to kind of fly around and kind of look at the world from the sky, right? So that means I was not content in the present moment. My mind wanted to be something else. That's what the unenlightened mind does. It's always craving and longing, yearning for what it doesn't have, right? It's not content in the present moment. So by getting rid of this, your mind is more content in the present moment in your current existence. And you will have actually eliminated the fear of death by the time you get to this point. Then there's conceit. What conceit is the arrogance, the pride, the measuring and comparing, thinking of yourself that you're above people or thinking of yourself as below people. This is where the mind kind of has like a pecking order, thinking that you're superior or inferior to other people. And putting yourself below people is actually just as dangerous as putting yourself above people. If you put yourself above people, you'll kind of talk down to them. But if you put yourself above people, you'll also put yourself below people, where in certain situations you'll feel shaken up, maybe when you're around your boss or maybe a certain famous celebrity or a political person or something like this. So you need to get to the point where you think of yourself as being equal, that you're not measuring and comparing yourself and judging other people. And this is part of what helps you to get to peace and joy, because if you've ever been in a social situation, you might be trying to measure people. You might say, hey, what do you do? And so I might say, I'm a lawyer. And you're like, oh, well, I'm a doctor. Right? And you're just kind of trying to measure and compare yourself to other people, and you're not content in the present moment. And now when you're having that arrogance and pride, people are going to just push you to the side. They're not going to be interested in spending time with you. And if you're putting yourself below people, your mind's all shaken up in this situation and people don't have confidence in you. So you can get rid of this conceit. And I'm going to teach you how to do that by the time we actually get to chapter 16 in this program. Then there's restlessness, where the mind is overactive and having anxiety. This is where you might be like kind of bobbing your knee or tapping your finger or tapping a pencil. This is your mind that's restless. It's obsessive and overactive, but it's coming out through the body. So you can eliminate this through the teachings of the Buddha. Then there's the fetter of all fetters. This is called ignorance, or the unknowing of true reality. This is where the mind lacks wisdom. It just doesn't understand what it doesn't understand. It's confused and has misunderstanding or confusion or lack of wisdom in the mind. This is what's keeping all the others in place. So that's why everything on the path to enlightenment is to cultivate wisdom, because you can't eliminate this unknowing of true reality through belief, because you don't know what's true or false. You're just believing it. So this is actually what's keeping the mind in the unenlightened state. So for example, the mind will lack wisdom of things like the natural law of karma, or the Eightfold Path or things of this nature, that the mind will just think that it knows what it knows, and it doesn't think that there's anything else that it can know, that it is holding on to what it currently thinks about the world, rather than realizing that there's things about the world that you don't currently understand. If you experience anger and sadness and frustration and all these other feelings, there are certain things about this world that your mind doesn't yet understand. And you need to be open to understanding that and cultivate wisdom. That's what's going to eliminate this ignorance. So any questions on any of these 5 here? Anything you guys would like to ask? No questions? Okay. So as your mind's moving through as your mind's eliminating those fetters, those pollutions of mind, you're going to be moving through the 4 stages of enlightenment. So as you eliminate the first 3 fetters, your mind will actually move into this first stage of enlightenment. In this stage of enlightenment, your discontentedness is significantly diminished, where you're still experiencing discontentedness, but it's not like it was when you were off the path to enlightenment. It's just a mere fraction of what it once was, because you've eliminated these first 3 fetters. We call this a stream enterer, because once you get into this first stage of enlightenment, just like a log enters the stream, it's going to eventually get to the ocean. The same thing is true, that once you get to the first stage of enlightenment, you will get to enlightenment. It's only a matter of time. So today we call these the first, second, third, and fourth stage of enlightenment. But during the lifetime of the Buddha, they referred to it as a stream enterer. And he also referred to it occasionally as the first, second, third, and fourth stage as well. And then there's the second stage, which is called a once returner, where you've already eliminated the first 3 fetters, but you've thinned out number 4 and 5, meaning they're not as strong, they're not as prominent as they once were. Like if you think back to when you were a teenager, you probably were a lot more angry and frustrated as a teenager than you are maybe now. Maybe your anger is kind of dissipated a bit. That's what it means to thin a fetter. And just because you're less angry than you were when you were a teenager doesn't mean you're in the second stage of enlightenment. But I just give you that example to help you understand what it means to thin out a fetter. And we call this a once returner and a stream enterer. And if you die in this first stage, you'll actually come back into the world no more than 7 times, and you'll actually make your way to enlightenment. If you die in this second stage, you'll come back into the human realm 1 more time, and you'll actually get to enlightenment in that existence. So you actually might have been a stream enterer or a once returner in your past life, and now this is your opportunity to get to enlightenment. Then there's something called a non-returner. This is the third stage of enlightenment, where you've eliminated the 5 lower fetters. And this individual is actually experiencing discontentedness about once every 2 or 3 months, maybe once every 6 months, where it's very infrequent and it's very insignificant when it's occurring. Other people probably don't even know you're discontent when you're in this third stage of enlightenment, because it's just inside your own mind. So you need to be very diligent here, because you can be complacent because you're very infrequently experiencing discontentedness and it's very insignificant. You can kind of like be a little bit complacent with it. So you need to stay diligent here. And we call this a non-returner, because if you die in this stage of enlightenment, you actually won't come back to this world. You'll actually be reborn into the heavenly world, and you'll actually attain enlightenment from there. Again, these are all things that can be independently verified, but you just don't have that wisdom of how to do it right now. But you can cultivate that wisdom over time. And then the fourth stage of enlightenment, where the mind is actually enlightened. They used to refer to this as an arahant, and you hear people refer to it this way today too. Today we would just call this person an enlightened being. They've completely purified their mind of all the 10 fetters. They're not experiencing any discontentedness at all. It'll be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, no discontentedness in the mind whatsoever. And if you die in this stage of enlightenment, you actually aren't reborn at all. The Buddha leaves it as an undeclared teaching of what comes next for an enlightened being, because his teachings aren't about this afterlife. That's not what his teachings are about. His teachings are about getting to a wonderful life now in this existence. So he consciously and purposefully left it as an undeclared teaching. You can see it in his teachings. He says, remember what I taught. I taught this. And he points to a teaching. And then he says, remember what I did not teach. I did not teach this. And he points to 10 different things that he didn't teach. And this is one of those things, because it doesn't matter if something's next or not for an enlightened being. Because as an enlightened being, you're already so peaceful and you're already so joyful. If there's something next, it's either as good as what you're currently experiencing or better. And if there is nothing next, well, so be it. You're already content and peaceful in the present moment, right? So the Buddha purposefully left this as an undeclared teaching. So these are the 4 stages of enlightenment. And then there's something called a Buddha. This is an enlightened being. They are an arahant, but they've actually gotten to enlightenment in a unique way. This is a very rare type of individual. This isn't an actual stage of enlightenment. Some people will tell you that everybody is a Buddha, or they'll say you have Buddha nature, or that you can attain Buddhahood. But the Buddha never actually taught those kinds of things. Those are misunderstandings that people have today. What a Buddha is somebody who's gotten to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. They then dedicate the rest of their life to sharing their independently discovered teachings with countless people, and countless people will get to enlightenment during that person's lifetime. Then they will preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people will get to enlightenment after their death. So these are the 3 criteria of what make a Buddha. And this type of individual is very rare in the world. The Buddha talks about this. The last one that the world's currently aware of existed over 2,500 years ago. This individual that we refer to as the Buddha. There's other criteria that a Buddha has as well. They have a deep, profound memory that they can remember countless details about their current life and their previous lives as well. And they bring forth all that wisdom in their last life to be able to actually get to enlightenment. That's how they actually get to enlightenment, because they remember all these details of their life. Where you kind of have a limited memory, that's why you have spotty memories about your past. You can't remember everything. You just have spotty memories because you don't have this unlimited memory. They also can quickly determine the condition of a student's mind by spending time with them, and then they will offer them teachings to be able to help them. And then they're also a living, breathing, walking example of their teachings. A Buddha understands that they're teaching just as much through their spoken words as they are through their actions. So they will actually be practicing the same things that they're teaching so that their students can actually learn through their actions, not just through their words. So this is what a Buddha is, and we refer to this person as a fully, perfectly enlightened one. Because by the time they get to enlightenment, they understand the path very well, and they illuminate that path for everybody else to be able to see what it takes to be able to get to enlightenment. Where you can get to enlightenment, but you won't be fully, perfectly enlightened because you're going to have a few things that you're still doing that actually didn't lead to your enlightenment, but you're maybe still doing those kinds of things. So this type of person, we refer to them as fully, perfectly enlightened. Okay. And now just one more thing, and then we'll be finished here, is to share with you how to know that you're not enlightened. This is one of the ways that I actually like to teach, is teach you what something is, and then I teach you something that is not, because that's actually going to help you to understand what something is. So if you experience these conditioned feelings, remember, as conditioned feelings, that they arise, they change, and they fade away, you know that you're not enlightened yet, right? So this conditional happiness is conditional. And sometimes when people say this, they see this, they're like, hey, I'm not going to be happy when I'm enlightened. Oh, no, you're going to be plenty happy. It's just going to be unconditioned happiness. That with the conditioned happiness, you can only be happy if certain conditions are met. And you're beyond that by the time you get to enlightenment. If you have a craving, desire, attachment to tell other people that you're enlightened, you're not actually enlightened. So if somebody rolls up to you at the grocery store or at a retreat, and they're like, by the way, don't tell anybody, but I'm enlightened, you know that they're not enlightened, right? Because they're bragging, they're boastful. It's like, what do you want? Do you want us to bow down to you? Do you want us to give you admiration? What do you want from us, right? So if somebody tells you that they're enlightened, you know that they're actually not enlightened. So you can keep that in mind, that by the time you get to enlightenment, you won't be going around bragging to other people that you're enlightened. You're not going to put it on your Facebook profile, right? You're not going to call up your mom and be like, Mom, aren't you so proud of me? I'm enlightened, right? This isn't something that you're going to do. Or if you notice that you have complacency, or you have a lack of motivation or enthusiasm and ambition, then you know your mind's not enlightened. Because the unenlightened mind, you'll either be chasing, or you'll swing all the way to the other side where you're kind of dull and lethargic and lazy. And that's not what an enlightened being's mind is doing. They're in the middle where their mind is bright and cheerful and glad and uplifted at all times. In fact, an enlightened being never gets exhausted. They don't get tired. They get sleepy where they need to sleep, but they actually don't get exhausted or tired. Because in the unenlightened state, when you go out in the world with chasing your cravings, if they're getting fulfilled, you'll be so happy. You'll be excited. You'll be like, this is the best day ever. But if you go out into the world and your cravings aren't getting fulfilled, you'll be like, this was a horrible day. Right? This was a miserable day because you weren't getting what you wanted. But in the enlightened mental state, you're always enjoying every single thing that you're doing. So you don't experience that exhaustion and that tiredness when you get home at the end of your day and you feel like you got bricks on your feet or bricks on your shoulders. That's because you're carrying around these cravings. But an enlightened being doesn't experience that. Their mind is bright and cheerful and uplifted. And because the mind is tranquil, the body is tranquil as well. So any questions on any of this? No questions? Okay, I don't see any questions here online either. Okay, so what I'll do then is I'll just end by thanking you guys for joining. Thank you for your interest to learn and understand the teachings of the Buddha. As you guys would like to learn more, there's plenty of opportunities for that. You can check our website. You can check our bulletin board. You'll see all those opportunities for you. And you can also come talk to me. I can help you get plugged into the teachings because everything I do here is available for you at no cost, whether it's the books, audiobooks, videos, podcasts, whether it's classes, courses, retreats, whether it's learning with me on an individual basis. You can learn and understand the teachings to be able to gradually make your way to enlightenment. So there's lots of availability for you guys to be able to access all these things. You just need to get plugged into the teachings. And I suggest that people start with this first book and then in this program on Sundays and Wednesdays. So next Wednesday, I'm going to be in chapter 4, which is the Four Noble Truths. This is the very first teaching of the Buddha, where you can actually have a breakthrough to understanding what's causing your mind to experience these discontent feelings so that then you can actually eliminate them. So that's the very first teaching of the Buddha. So have a very lovely and wonderful rest of your day. Perhaps we'll see you next time. Sawadee Kap. Sawadee Kap.
Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.